All right, welcome. Today, we are going to break down the absolute engine of our economy, the firm. We'll get into the nitty-gritty of how businesses survive, how they thrive, and really, how the world they live in shapes every single move they make. Yeah, what do they have in common? On the surface, you'd say, not a whole lot. But here's the thing. In the world of economics, every single one of them is a player in this huge economic game. And that game has rules, a landscape that basically dictates what you pay for stuff and the choices you get to make. So, let's just dive right in.
Okay, so here's the game plan for today. First up, we're going to tackle the most fundamental decision any business has to make. Then, we'll see how they get bigger. After that, we'll explore the 4 competitive playgrounds they all operate in. And finally, we'll figure out how we can actually measure who's got the most power in that playground. Sound good? Let's go.
All right, put yourself in this situation. You've just started your dream food truck. It's 6 in the morning, you're looking at your supplies, and you have to ask yourself the most important question of the day. Is it even worth it to open up? I mean, that simple question. That's at the very heart of business survival. So, this is goal number 1, hitting your break-even point. This is that magic moment when the money you make from selling tacos exactly covers everything. The ingredients, the gas for the truck, your own salary, the whole shebang. So you're not technically losing money, but you're not exactly rolling in it either. You're just breaking even.
Okay, but then there's the shutdown point. And this is a whole lot more serious. This is when, say, a freak thunderstorm rolls in and nobody's buying tacos. The money you're making doesn't even cover the cost of the ground beef and tortillas for that day, your variable costs. And here's the key thing to get. You're actually better off just closing up shop for the day. Yeah, you still have to pay for the truck lease, that's a fixed cost, but you stop the bleeding by not buying more ingredients that you just can't sell.
This table right here, it just lays out the whole decision-making process beautifully. Look, in the short run, as long as your revenue is covering your variable costs, the day-to-day stuff, you stay open, right? You're at least contributing something towards that big truck lease payment. But, and this is a big but, if that keeps happening day after day, you just can't survive. In the long run, you've got to exit the market. And what if you can't even cover the cost of tortillas for the day? Well, that's an easy one. You shut down immediately.
All right, let's switch gears a bit. Let's say your food truck is an absolute smash hit. The line is around the block every day, you're making good money, and you're thinking, what's next? Expansion. But as you're about to see, getting bigger brings a whole new set of challenges.
This right here is the magic of growth. It's called economies of scale. Think about it. When you go from one food truck to a whole fleet, everything changes. You're not buying ground beef by the pound anymore. You're buying it by the truckload, and you get way better prices. You can set up a central kitchen that's super efficient. All of this just drives down the average cost of making a single taco, which means more profit for you.
But, and there's always a but, right? Get too big and you can slam right into a wall. We call this diseconomies of scale. Just imagine trying to manage 500 food trucks all over the country. Suddenly, a simple decision takes a week to get approved. There's red tape everywhere, communication gets messy, and believe it or not, your costs can actually start to creep back up.
So what's the goal then? For any business, whether it's a food truck empire or a giant car company, the trick is to find that perfect size. It's called the minimum efficient scale. It's that sweet spot where your costs are as low as they can possibly be. You're big enough to be a powerhouse, but you're not so big that you've become slow and clumsy.
Okay, so all of these decisions we've been talking about, pricing, how much to produce, whether to grow, none of that happens in a bubble. It is all massively, and I mean massively, influenced by the market a business operates in. Think of it like their competitive playground. And here's the cool part. Every single business fits into one of these 4 main categories.
This table is basically the master blueprint for understanding competition. We can classify any market by asking a few simple questions. How many sellers are there? Are their products all the same, or are they different? How hard is it for someone new to jump in and compete? And based on all that, how much power does one company really have to set its own price? So, at one extreme, you've got perfect competition. Think of thousands of wheat farmers. The wheat from one farm is identical to the wheat from another, and no single farmer is big enough to change the global price of wheat. They're what we call price takers. Now, one step over from that is monopolistic competition. This is your food truck. Sure, there are lots of other food trucks, but you've got your secret sauce, your cool brand, that little bit of uniqueness. That gives you some power over your prices. Then, the field starts to get a lot smaller. In an oligopoly, the market is dominated by just a few huge players. Think about cell phone providers or airlines. They are constantly watching each other's every move. Finally, you have the monopoly, a market with just one seller. Your local electric utility is a classic example. They are the only game in town, which gives them a ton of power over prices, and that's exactly why the government usually steps in to regulate them.
Now this is such a cool idea, and it explains why prices in an oligopoly seem so, well, sticky. Think about it from an airline's perspective. If they raise their prices, what are their rivals going to do? Probably nothing. They'll just sit back and happily scoop up all the customers who want a cheaper flight. But what if that same airline lowers its prices? You can bet every other airline will match that price cut within hours. So you see the dilemma? There's no good reason to change your price.
So, why does any of this matter to you? Well, this isn't just some abstract economic theory. It directly hits your wallet. The reason your electricity bill is pretty stable month to month is because it comes from a regulated monopoly. But the reason a plane ticket can change price 3 times in a single afternoon? That's the wild, strategic game of an oligopoly, playing out in real time. Okay, so if these market structures are so incredibly important, how do we actually, measure them? How can we tell if a market is competitive or not? This is a huge deal for government regulators, especially when 2 massive companies say they want to merge. Let's look at the tools they use.
The first tool in the box, and the simplest, is the concentration ratio. It's super straightforward. You just add up the market shares of the biggest companies, like the top 4, for example. It gives you a quick and dirty snapshot of who runs the show, but it's got a big flaw. Imagine the top 2 companies merge into one giant. This ratio might not change all that much, even though the market just got way less competitive.
So, for a much more accurate picture, economists turn to something called the Herfindahl-Hirschman Index. Yeah, I know, it's a mouthful. We just call it the HHI. But the idea behind it is actually simple and really clever. You take the market share of every company in the market, you square it, and then you add all those squared numbers up. By squaring them, you give way more weight to the biggest players. This makes the HHI super sensitive to any changes at the top of the market.
And this table just shows you perfectly why the HHI is the go-to tool. Look, before the merger, you've got an HHI of 0.225. But then Firm 1 and Firm 2 merge, creating this new behemoth with 60% of the market. And what happens? Bam! The HHI almost doubles to 0.410. Now that is a massive red flag. That's the kind of jump that makes regulators sit up and pay very close attention.
And all of this leaves us with a really big, important question for the future. As we see more and more consolidation happening in huge industries, I'm talking tech, media, you name it, are we heading toward a future that's just dominated by a few powerful oligopolies? And if we are, what does that mean for the balance of power between us, the consumers, and the giant companies we buy from? Something to think about.